If you are a trauma survivor or you're anxiously attached and you overthink and you intellectualize, what you're doing in talk therapy is you're becoming aware of all these patterns. You can know why you're doing the things that you're doing, but it's not healing the root of it. And so when you're talking about your trauma or your anxiety, what's happening is the body doesn't understand that that was in the past. It's reliving it as if it's reliving that past right now. So
Yeah.
when you're talking about your trauma, you're actually re-traumatizing yourself. And so with somatic therapy, we're working with the emotions, the sensations, the feelings, and actually completing that trauma cycle.
When you go beyond the surface and into the depths of who you truly are, you will rise.
Valerie, welcome to the podcast. I am so excited for us to be in conversation. And really want to know what got you into this work as a relationship and anxiety therapy. What brought you to this work?
All my life, I really struggled with chronic debilitating anxiety. And because it was so unresolved, I was doing all the quote unquote right things. I was seeing a talk therapist for years. I was doing yoga. I was meditating every day. I was exercising. I even changed my diet. I even got on medication and that wasn't helpful. And so then what ended up happening is I started to develop chronic pain. It started with chronic headaches, chronic neck pain, IBS, adrenal fatigue, cystic acne. And so it then just developed into my health. And it looked like on paper that I had fibromyalgia, but there was no medical cause. So then I discovered hypnotherapy and it really helped move the needle in the anxiety, helped to reduce it. And then the chronic pain went away within 6 months. And then a few things in my personal life happened and in my professional life that made me kind of pivot somewhat into the relationships piece so because of my journey with anxiety, I really decided I was not going to get my PhD in clinical psychology, which was my original plan. And then I decided to train in hypnotherapy. And then I was working for a few years with just chronic anxiety, people struggling with that and PTSD. And the people who weren't getting results were typically in toxic relationships, trauma bonds, and just had chronic anxiety in relationships, aka also known as an anxious attachment style. And so within that, I then discovered somatic therapy. But before I kind of discovered somatic therapy, um, in my own life, I went through a trauma bonded relationship and I was in this toxic relationship. And so I noticed that I needed deeper support. I learned how to regulate my nervous system and learned different physiological tools to really regulate. And then also somatic therapy, because this person was familiar to me unconsciously. I just felt this pull to him. No matter what anyone said, all the red flags, I still felt I needed him. He was my lifeline. And that's what a lot of people who struggle with anxious attachment feel like. And so after that breakup, I really just dove deep into somatic therapy, and really stop that pattern of attracting and being attracted to emotionally unavailable partners.
I kind of want to talk a little bit more of maybe the root of the anxious attachment style. What do you see as the deep
Mm,
rooted cause of anxious
yes.
attachment?
Yes. So I would say the deep rooted cause of anxious attachment is when you have had inconsistent caregivers, right? One day they meet your needs, one day they don't. One day they're very kind and loving, and then the next day they're pulling away. For me, from an example, my father was a narcissist, and I also have an autistic brother. And so my mom, her attention was diverted and couldn't give me the attention that I needed growing up. And so it was just very inconsistent. My brother would need her or my dad would need her And so my needs would get pulled to the wayside. So that's really how mine started to develop. And then what ends up happening is because the child cannot regulate their own emotions, they need a caregiver to do that. Because of that, they're left feeling my safety is now external. I can't get it from within because I was never modeled that. So, what ends up happening in adult relationships is we're hyper vigilant. We are hyper attuned to anyone's face, any shift in their mood, in their face, in their body language, in their tone, because we're waiting for the shoe to drop in our relationships. And so that's really how it develops. Also, with anxious attachment, it's this deep fear of abandonment, really scared that the ones closest to us will leave.
Yeah. Mm. Like I said, I have an anxious attachment, that's for sure. And
Mm-hmm.
and you know what? I actually really love the awareness around it too, because I think it's I always say awareness is power. I feel like I
Mm-hmm.
sound like a broken record on that. I say it so many times, but I believe it so deeply to our core because then we can start to pay attention in, in
Mm-hmm.
those moments when we are feeling triggered. Maybe we don't necessarily know that we're being triggered in the moment, but I feel like we
Mm-hmm.
can have a better understanding as to why it is we react in certain situations, why it is that we are
Yes.
triggered, what's, whatsoever why maybe
Mm-hmm.
patterns start happening in relationships and where the relationships are not necessarily working when we're looking for a partner and
Mm-hmm.
why is it that I mean just why is it that I guess we stay in these cycles and these patterns being with emotionally unavailable people even though we may deeply know that this is not healthy for us.
Yes, this is such a great question. So, we have something called neuroception, and it keeps a log with everything that we've been through. And so, what our brain and body and our nervous system finds safe is what is certain. So, if we had an emotionally unavailable parent, that is what is safe to our nervous system growing up. We associate love with unavailability, abandonment, stress. And so you might know, hey, this person has a ton of red flags and he's being emotionally unavailable. But what we end up doing is in childhood, for example, if you had an emotionally unavailable caregiver, if you see your parent as a quote unquote bad parent or unavailable, or just seeing them for what they are, they can't meet my needs consistently, that
Yeah.
would break a child's psyche. The child is completely dependent on the parent. And so they develop these protector parts. One that is very common is fantasy thinking, right? If my parent can't meet my emotional needs, I'm going to see them as, you know, I'm going to see them as they can change. And so we're not actually seeing them for who they are. This is why seeing someone for their potential, it's really coming from that protector part. Or a lot of my clients, if they're stuck in trauma bonds or toxic relationships, they can have also another protector part, cognitive dissonance, right? One part of them knows, hey, this person has red flags, that this is not going to work compatibility wise long term. But then another part is like, but it's so good. So it's very confusing for the person when they have this cognitive dissonance. So those are a few of the protector parts. And then rumination, right? Again, going back to if you have an anxious attachment style, you're over analyzing everything your partner is doing. Are their actions, what their inactions or actions are doing are making me feel anxious or making me feel a certain way.
Mhm.
I kind of went off on a tangent there, but you can see how if you have this kind of templating, then your body feels safest in relationships with someone unavailable. You're going to stay in these cycles. And what a lot of my clients tell me is the healthy, secure partners, I'm not physically attracted to them, they're boring, or they give me the ick. But the
Mhm.
toxic or unavailable partners feel like I get butterflies. I feel the spark. I feel magnetized towards that. But that's really their attachment trauma getting activated.
So wild. Oh my gosh. I want to go
Yeah.
back to one of the things that you said about,
Mhm.
and I don't know exactly what protection you were talking about, but the piece around not being able to see them for who they truly are. And
Mm.
specifically, you were saying about believing that they can change. I don't know the exact wording that you use.
Yeah. Fantasy thinking.
Yeah. Is that truly a, I guess, wrong thing to have maybe this optimism? But I can see what you mean
Mm.
about it being protection. I specifically remember having conversations with my husband about this maybe 6 months ago.
Mm.
So I'm
Mm.
curious.
Yeah, I think just anything, there's nuance to this conversation, right? Maybe your partner says, I want to work out or something. Maybe they don't work out and then they end up doing it, right? I think there's a spectrum for all things. We can see their potential and see their greatness. It's not always a quote unquote bad thing, but typically if you find yourself in toxic relationships and then it ends and you're like, "Oh my god, how did I not see it?" It's
Yeah.
because that protector part was there. Because it's too painful. And what's really happening, these protector parts are stopping you from feeling that fear of abandonment. Because if this person is my lifeline and I'm dependent on them for my survival, that's coming from our young parts, our inner child, then actually seeing them for who they are is going to force us to feel all of the abandonment wounds that we haven't yet faced from our childhood. Because any big reaction that we have is not coming from our true adult self who feels capable, secure. It's coming from a young part of us, a younger version of us.
Yeah. I am very mindful how this is going to come across. We get to choose our partners when it comes down to it. We get to make that choice of whether or not we want to be in this relationship or not. In a partnership, sometimes it's easier to say, well, okay, after a while, maybe after some time, we've walked away, we've moved on from that relationship. I find it can be a little bit more complex when it comes down to our relationships with our parents. I can't imagine a world not thinking, my parents can change, because I feel that's what I've always known, but I also see that how much that's been a protection, and also it's been a way, this is new information for me over the last 6 months of just this work that I've been doing mainly around my inner child, is how much
Mm,
that's been such a hindrance for me in my own healing, because I've never allowed
mhm,
myself to truly feel and acknowledge, not necessarily that my childhood was bad or wrong, but I did grow
mhm,
up in a single parent household. And
mhm,
yeah, it's just one of those things where I never gave myself permission to really acknowledge that these were some of the things that happened. And maybe in ways, not necessarily just one parent, but in ways both parents were not emotionally available. And I always focused on one parent, one relationship, but I start to see how it was different, but in ways very similar where there was that unavailability.
yeah, and I first want to acknowledge how human that is because and how normal that is because it's fucking terrifying to be because right there's when we work on that protector part underneath that there is so much grief and anger and maybe feelings of abandonment that's underneath that when we can see our parent or parents for who they are, that can feel very disorienting and terrifying. As I've done somatic therapy, different memories may come to the surface. You can see them more clearly for what they've done especially as you work through those protective parts. And I just remember for me, it was terrifying being like, wow, my mom wasn't really there when I needed her. Maybe she wasn't the perfect parent that I, as a child, pedestalized her on. It's a very scary realization and the feelings that can come with it. But also, there can come a lot of freedom in that because also then you learn how to reparent yourself as you continue doing that work. And you really acknowledge what your inner child was left with and all the pain that she was carrying for so long that she didn't deserve to carry. And I think like that reparenting inner child work is so beautiful and amazing. That's wonderful that you're also stepping into that. But yeah, like know that it's fucking challenging to see your parents for who they are. And it can be quite a mind fuck when you've had that protector part your whole life, me included.
Totally. It's yeah, and I do wanna say too, I think there's also a way to do it to not
Hmm.
completely shift into a blaming thing, because that's also
Yes.
not helpful whatsoever. It's just a matter of
Correct.
we can acknowledge our inner child and acknowledge what
Hmm.
they did or did not have and let that be
Hmm.
that. And I think that's the point. That's the purpose
Hmm.
of doing this work. The purpose is not to then find somebody else to blame for this, because
Correct.
that's also not part of this.
Yes. And I'm so glad you brought that up because as you heal and do this work, you're going to have even more compassion for them. As I continue doing that work and healing those wounds, and as I've healed that protector part, it's like, yeah, I can really see from an adult perspective, right? I'm in my adult self. Wow, my mom was really fucking stretched thin. She had 3 children, one with autism, a father who was a narcissist who had a lot of health issues, right? I can have so much compassion. No wonder why she couldn't be there for me as much as I needed her to, right? And, I can see her kindness and who she is, right? Yeah. And a lot of people can get stuck in the blaming phase because that stops them from feeling the grief that's actually in there. And that's what I see a lot of people doing in my space who talk about anxious attachment is they can vilify, make someone who's avoidantly attached the villain. They're someone who's bad and they're the source of my pain. But no, it goes 2 ways. I'm going to call myself out. In previous relationships, I looked more on the surface, anxious leaning, but I was really emotionally avoidant toward myself. I wasn't being truly vulnerable with my
Mhm.
partners. And then it's, well, no wonder why I was feeling so unseen, so unheard, and I wasn't feeling met in the relationship. And I could go point, 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 but they're a direct mirror to you. And people who are more anxious leaning, right? They think, "Oh, I can be so emotionally available." And there's a spectrum to that, of course. But what's actually happening is we're hyper available to other and then emotionally unavailable to ourselves.
Oh, I have goosebumps because that is so true. Oh
Yeah.
man, there's so
Yeah.
much truth in that. Do you find, or is it possible that this anxiousness, speaking specifically to the anxious attachment style, do you feel like, is it possible for it to come out in certain relationships and not in others?
Yes.
Mm.
100%. Because we can have different attachment styles in friendships versus romantic relationships versus business and work, depending on your templating. Because you could, or what you've learned, what growing up. And so someone could be more avoidant in their finances and their work, and then they could be secure in their friendships, and then they could be secure in their, and then they could be anxious in their romantic relationships. So it all depends. It all can depend, but you can have different attachment styles even to different people for sure.
I'm
Yeah.
so glad you say that, because it's as I'm reading and learning more about these attachment styles, I see the anxious attachment style and I also see the avoidant. And
Hmm.
yeah, I'm glad that you say it, and I also can see you saying avoid it with finances. I'm like, yeah, hello, me. But again,
Yeah.
comes back to so much of what we were taught or not taught as well.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that's why I really come from a like non-pathologizing lens. Like, yes, I am an anxious attachment specialist, but at the end of the day, like these terms or your attachment style does not define you. Like that's just one small thing in the beginning that explains, okay, why eh, is my behavior this way or showing these
Hmm.
patterns, but absolutely you can work on healing these parts of yourself so that you can develop more of an earned securely attached attachment. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I want to go to something that you talked about in at the beginning about talk therapy, because you were saying how you were in talk
Yes.
therapy for so long and it just never really moved that needle. And I'm curious
Mhm.
if you can unpack that a little bit more as to why, traditional talk therapy is, I guess, just in a way, like not the only piece to the puzzle.
Yes. Thank you so much for asking this question. So, with talk therapy, I think it can be a great beginning first step. I needed to learn certain things about my patterns, my family that I wasn't aware of. So I think talk therapy can be a great first step. But if you are a trauma survivor or you're anxiously attached and you overthink and you intellectualize, what you're doing in talk therapy is you're becoming aware of all these patterns. You can know why you're doing the things that you're doing, but it's not healing the root of it. And so when you're talking about your trauma or your anxiety, what's happening is the body doesn't understand that that was in the past. It's reliving it as if it's reliving that past right now. So when you're talking about your trauma, you're actually re-traumatizing yourself. And so with somatic therapy, we're working with the emotions, the sensations, the feelings, and actually completing that trauma cycle. So clients will tell me, I feel like I can finally take a deep breath. Oh, I feel a sense of relief in my body. I feel more connected to myself. I feel more in tune with myself. I finally feel safe after never feeling safe in my body my entire 35 years of life. So it's really, really important that we don't just stuck in building awareness phase because that's not going to complete that.
Yeah, because again, just so much I've learned over the last couple of years is just the storage of trauma in our body. And
Yes.
I think that's the piece that's almost a big piece that I feel is not talked about enough, but thankfully, I feel there has been more of that conversation happening because there are a lot of more people that are doing somatic work and bringing that
Hmm.
in, breath work being one thing that really helps us get into our bodies. And that's why I feel like this was a aha from another conversation I had, but this aha moment of we truly have to find the pieces to our puzzle. When I say pieces to our puzzle, I
Correct.
mean the things that work for us, whether it be talk therapy but it all for it to be this full picture or this full package of really being supportive on the journey and of healing, if that's what you want to call it, it has to be a mind, body, soul integration. We can't have
Yes.
we can't just have the mind.
Correct.
We're only gonna go as far if you're only just focused on talk therapy. But again, there's just so much that I think even for myself, that's such a big um block almost when someone
Hmm.
when you're in like stations or you're working with someone and they're like, where is your first memory of this? That to me is so in my mind, and I get so stuck in the sense that I don't even have these memories. I'm like, I don't have these memories from my childhood. If I'm like willing myself to try and go there, nothing's happening.
Hmm.
What the hell's wrong with me? Because I can't remember this stuff. Right? I know.
No, no, yeah. Oh my god, I'm so glad you brought that up. Okay, so 2 things. I'm gonna go back to not having childhood memories, and then the second with going back to the body. You cannot think your way out of an anxious response. If your partner pulls away or even is going on a business trip, that's a big one that my clients tell me, right?
Mhm.
He's leaving for the weekend. You're like, "Oh, I'm gonna miss you so much. I'm anxious." Your fear of abandonment comes up and you're like, "Oh my God, what if he leaves me? What if he finds someone else? What if he finds someone more interesting over there?" You cannot think your way out of that response because trauma is physiological. So that is why somatic therapy is so key here. And it is a complete puzzle, right? And that's what I really help to solve for my clients is we first have to start to feel safe in our body because what ends up happening is when we've been exposed to chronic stress or trauma, we have something called our vagus nerve, and that controls whether or not our fight or flight response gets turned on. But when we have been exposed to chronic stress or trauma, it doesn't work as efficiently. So then we're stuck in hypervigilance and chronic anxiety. So when we do things to stimulate the vagus nerve and doing these physiological things, then our body starts to feel safe. And then also, what a lot of people aren't educated around is the nervous system. We have Well, some people say we have 6 states. These are the primary 4 that I work with my clients is fight, right? That anger response, flight, which is anxiety, freeze, which could look like depression, and then fawn, which is people pleasing and codependency. So we need specific tools for each state. So Ashley, you talked about meditation. If you're feeling very anxious, you're close to a panic attack, that level as at a 7 to 10 on anxiety. Our body believes that a tiger is chasing us. So the
Hmm.
last thing we want to do is sit down and meditate with our eyes closed. We want to
Yeah.
do different somatic movements to release that adrenaline and excess cortisol to actually bring us back into a state of homeostasis. So that's the first piece is finding specific tools that work best for each person's nervous system. Because I might want somatic tool and it might work well for me in one state, but it might not work well for you and your nervous system. So that's why I have a wider range of tools and practices that really help clients. And then we're diving into the somatic therapy. What is the origin of your fear of abandonment?
Yeah.
Where is this chronic anxiety coming from? When did we first learn that we had to prove our worth, that we're not good enough? And so that's really completing the puzzle. But going back to not having enough memories, this is a brilliant survival mechanism that our brain has given us. Because if we've experienced childhood trauma, if we were to just sit with all of it all at once and remember everything, that would be way too much for our body and our brain. We
Mm.
would actually go insane. So our body is so brilliant in blocking those things out. And then as we continue feeling safer in our body and doing
And
some of those somatic tools and nervous system regulation, we're going to start to feel safer. So memories will naturally come up. And so that's why a lot of clients can feel, am I regressing? All these memories are coming up, but no, that's actually a great sign and showing us that your body feels safe to bring this up.
I really love that, and I think that's such a powerful perspective, and I do wanna kind of tackle a little bit more about this safety piece because I feel it's something
Hmm.
that we talk a lot about of feeling safe, and it's like, tangibly, what exactly does that mean to feel safe
Mm,
in our body? And I love that you said that how, when all these memories start coming up, it's like, that's actually a really good sign to show that you are feeling safe in your body. I guess more so the question is, how do we get there? That's always the how. How do we get there?
I think I don't think anyone has ever asked me that. What does that actually mean? So kind of going back to the nervous system, how we know that we are actually safe is we're in this part of our nervous system called the ventral vagal. So this just means we're feeling gratitude, we're feeling calm, we're feeling present, we're feeling connected to ourselves or other or nature or the earth, and you just feel really good. You feel just calm, and I can be present. This could look also not really needing to be on your phone, right? Because that's really automatic for us, especially as entrepreneurs, if you're listening to this. So that's one way that we can know that we're being safe. And then how do we get there is starting to practice feeling even 1% safer each day. So this could
mm,
look like doing those vagus toning routines that stimulate the vagus nerve. This helps to turn on that regulated state with these different tools. So as we do that consistently, our baseline in our nervous system is going to be that ventral vagal state. It's going to be us feeling more present and more calm. And that doesn't mean that we're never dysregulated and never anxious and never triggered. Absolutely not. It just means that we also have a greater capacity to be with our emotions and the anxiety, and we're suppressing less. Are just feeling, just we have more capacity for like going after our goals, or we just feel we can have more difficult conversations with our
right.
partners. That like these are all ways that safety can show up. And like a big thing, now I'm kind of going into relationships. I'm going into a tangent here, but if
Love it.
anyone's even watched Love is Blind, you can see that this is the case where they don't know how to navigate conflict because they don't know how to feel safe in their body with feeling these big emotions.
Yeah.
And so within that, if we can feel the discomfort in our own emotions, then we're going to be able to bring difficult things to the table. We're going to be able to navigate conflict a lot easier. We're going to be able to be vulnerable and do
Mhm.
those things that might feel exposing.
Yeah. And it's the thing I just want to add too is it ends up being because I mean for me it's sometimes when it comes to having these difficult conversations that I feel I real has been such a big piece in my own healing is bringing these tough conversations to the table, especially with my parents,
Mm,
having these conversations, but there's definitely a buildup. There's definitely
yes.
a little bit of anxiousness or
Yeah.
yeah, I guess like a little bit of anxiousness, but also too, it's just having the space to really process and be able to really move through the emotions that are all coming up to then be in a clear space to actually have a conversation where it's not one that's coming out in a state of being triggered or anything like that. But that's what I feel is it becomes easier to have the conversations. There's less of this crazy internal dialogue or spiral, as I like to call
Mhm.
them, where you're dialoguing a whole conversation in your brain before it actually even happens. You're making up this whole scenario happening and it doesn't have to be that, right?
Mhm.
It's just communicating my emotions, communicating my needs, and
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be this big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for me, and I'm glad you brought that up because people who are more anxious leaning or anxiously attached, they have a really big fear of conflict, and I have definitely had that myself. And I
Mhm.
think what's really helped is for me, it's surrounding myself with people who can sit in their own emotions and
Mm,
are will not they know how to have those difficult conversations and they validate how I'm feeling. And it's also knowing how to do that in a way that doesn't put someone on the defensive.
exact.
So, just even as an example, right? Your partner, because I kind of just watched Love is Blind yesterday. So I'm
All
thinking
good.
of
I'm a
things on the
huge
spot,
fan.
right? Yes, me as well. So thinking about, okay, your partner didn't pick up the towels and you are pissed. You're like, this bitch didn't fucking pick up my towels. I'm fucking pissed. I'm fucking enraged. Okay. So your mind, you're freaking activated. You're triggered. You're angry. So you go to them. This is the wrong way to do it. You didn't pick up your towel. I'm fucking pissed. What is this? Are you an idiot? That is a
Mhm.
way to put someone on the defensive. Versus if you come from a place of vulnerability, hey, I noticed the towel wasn't picked up on the floor. Feel a part of me feels unsupported. Could we make sure to pick up the towels more? What are your thoughts on that? You see how different the second one is?
Because it's coming from it's that I think this is such a I don't even know where I remember learning this, but for sure it was younger, but I just remember the big difference between coming across from you and I language. Again, maybe that was in college because
Mhm.
I went to school for social work, so maybe that's where I learned it, but
Mm.
it's such a shift in the dialogue. It's
Mhm.
creates it's exactly that. When we come into a situation or a conversation, you wanna bring across your emotions, but what's happening is we're
Mhm.
then coming from blaming, and sometimes we don't even realize that it's happening. And it's such a
Right.
conscious it's then you have to navigate I have to navigate all my emotions, and at the same time, I need to make sure that I'm paying attention to the language that I'm using. It's a lot of stuff there, but I think that's why, at least for me, the processing of emotions is such a
Yes.
big piece before coming to conversations, because then the trigger is it's just not there it's not as heightened. We're not in this emotional state
Mm.
where we're not thinking clearly.
Mhm. Absolutely. I always recommend if you can to process your emotions and regulate before coming into that conflict because that's huge and we're always picking up on other people's states. We have something called mirror neurons where we can literally feel what is happening inside someone else.
Mhm.
And so if you're coming from a calm and regulated place, other people can feel that and your conflicts and your disagreements will go a lot smoother.
Yeah. And I'm curious in terms of this, what's that first place that we can begin to start feeling safe, start maybe understanding what it is that our attachment style.
Think the place that we begin is learning how to process our emotions. Because if you're anxiously attached, right, you look for outside to help you process your emotions, to
Yeah.
feel safe in your body. And then with avoidant leaning, people who are avoidantly attached, they feel uncomfortable with the sensations in their body. So when we can start to slowly start to just notice, okay, what is coming out of my body? What sensations are here? What emotions are here? I have a whole meditation that walks you somatically how to actually process your emotions. And there's some breath work in there, inner child healing, and just that interoception where we're noticing sensations, emotions, de-shaming them. Because when we're anxiously attached, we've gotten a lot of that messaging that we're too much, we're not enough, our emotions are too big. So we learn to suppress them. So starting to do that every day is really going to help you feel safer in your body and in your relationships, regardless of your attachment style.
I agree. I think as soon as you said processing our emotions is hitting the nail on the head. I know that sounds so cliche, but I think for me why it stands out so much is because of especially this last year, I would say, of
Hmm.
just I would even say more so maybe the last couple of years, to be honest. I feel that was
Hmm.
such a intentional process for me without even learning about these attachment styles within the last year that I've actually really started to look at this information. But even just I would say about 2 years ago, maybe almost 3 years ago now, I remember making this very conscious decision. So you talked about we outsource. That's what I refer to it as. We outsource our power. We go to other
Hmm.
people to process. We go to other people to XYZ, whatever that looks like. But for me, it was okay. I'm going to build this relationship with myself. And instead of
Hmm.
going outward, I'm just going to go inward. Something is coming up and I'm being triggered. We're going to take that inward. Even down to the point of, I want to celebrate something that has happened and about myself. I'm going to bring that inward because then
Hmm.
it's, you don't necessarily need that validation from other people. You don't need that "Oh,
Hmm.
amazing, good job," right? Because that does something for us too at the same time. It's like turning everything inward first and then
Mm.
go out and share that with people. That was such a powerful choice for me. And again, I didn't make that it was just felt what I had to do and what I needed to do for myself. And that built so much self trust for myself and even just moving forward of just being able to really sit in the discomfort, being able to not get an answer right away. That I would say
Yeah.
is the thing, right? That's really uncomfortable to not just have a solution right away, to actually sit and wait for a solution to come, to ask
Mhm.
myself and, you know, allow that space for it to then come through. But then it's like when it does, it just feels so much more true. And yeah,
Mhm.
I guess that's the best word I can use to describe it. But it built this massive self trust with myself. And not to say that it's perfect, but I think it's just prepared me in ways to maybe it's feeling safer and safer in my body to really experience a lot that has come up for me in the last year, or even like 10 months or whatever.
Mhm. Absolutely. You literally learned how to self-source that validation and safety, and you built that capacity to be with whatever is here. And that's the path to healing really from anything and healing your anxious attachment. That is so huge.
Yeah. And we're not perfect. We're freaking human too. Like, and we're wired for
Yeah.
connection. So, you know what I mean? There's
Yes.
always going to be this dance with it at the end of the day.
Absolutely. That really is the best thing you can do for yourself because then other people stop having power over your emotions because you have them. You know how to process. You know how to regulate yourself. You know how to get yourself out of an anxious spiral. That is true power, true peace,
Uh,
learning
yeah.
those skills because
And we
nothing can
haven't
take that away.
exactly. I feel like that kind of leads into these three questions that I love to close with. What I've realized in the last couple of years is just when it comes down to doing this inner work, it really requires us to have a level of curiosity, right? Being curious about where we're being triggered, where these, maybe patterns that are not healthy, these behaviors, these beliefs show up. I think we have to have a level of curiosity to explore and to uncover the root of these of these patterns, of these cycles that we have that are not necessarily healthy for us. I feel courage to really tackle them and face them is such a big piece. And then also having compassion. So I want to ask you first and foremost, what is something, focusing on the curiosity piece first, what is one question about yourself or life in general that you are currently exploring right now?
Oh, that's a great question. Such a great question. I would say a question that I'm constantly asking myself is, am I loving myself in this moment? That's
Um,
usually what it's coming down to. And also, what are my next steps? I'm a digital nomad, and so of course there are uncertainties. I'm hopping from country to country, which is beautiful and amazing. And my brain is like, what's next? I'm just curious how this will all unfold. And if I didn't do the work to heal parts of my anxious attachment, there's no way that I would be able to handle being a digital nomad.
yeah, I was actually just thinking about that as you said that. I feel
Yeah.
like, if anything, too, what also a healing piece for the anxious attachment
Yes.
style to have
Yeah,
that
it
uncertainty.
definitely builds yeah, it definitely builds your capacity to be with uncertainty and, like, learning how to trust yourself even deeper.
Thanks for sharing that.
Thank
And
you.
in terms of the courage, what is a
Mm.
risk or a brave choice that you've made recently that has really shifted something for you?
Darn, I feel it's the same answer. Definitely becoming a digital nomad and, packing up my apartment, leaving almost all my friends and family behind, leaving my quote unquote stable life that was not actually propelling me forward. I had to have so much courage to actually leave and start my new life doing this. Yeah, I would say that took a fuck ton of courage, and I would be lying if there was no fear when I left. I mean, I was very excited, but of course, it's new, it's unfamiliar.
Yeah, lots of unknowns that come with that too, right? But I think
Mhm.
in ways you probably have discovered like just so much about yourself and also probably like your
Oh, yeah.
resilience in being in
Yes.
so much uncertainty.
Yeah, I think it was the biggest, best thing that I've ever done for myself. If you wanna expand your capacity, definitely travel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think but ultimately, it was the best decision of my life to leave Ohio and have these adventures. Yeah.
Love that. And the last question,
Yeah.
this is probably might be a
Yeah.
challenging one, but around compassion, where in your life are you learning to give yourself more grace?
That is such a great question. I'm learning to give myself more grace. Honestly, I'm gonna be a bit vulnerable here. So obviously, I'm also a content creator and promote my
Hmm.
coaching practice over social media. I'm learning to give myself more grace with posting.
Uh,
I post at least 3 to 4 times a week, but if it doesn't get the engagement that I think it should, I can get really activated and triggered, and it definitely triggers up my young parts. And so it's something that I'm continuously working on. Earlier, we talked about, attachment styles. Being vulnerable, I have more anxious parts when it comes to my company and showing up on social media because it's like you've learned in childhood it's not safe to be seen. It's not safe to use your voice. Of course, you're having and running a company or even this podcast for you, Ashley, it can trigger you at certain points. So that's something I'm learning to have more grace with myself. So yeah,
I'm celebrating you for sharing that and being so vulnerable.
thank
Thank
you.
you for sharing that with me. I think that is, I mean, I relate so much to that too. It's like
Yeah.
it's challenging, right? When we, especially you put so much effort and thought into something and you're like, and you're just, what the hell? But I think one
Hmm.
thing that someone shared with me maybe about a year ago is, just, and it really has helped. It's not perfect, but just looking at everything as a collection. I think sometimes
Yeah.
maybe this is just me, but you put pressure on one thing that you put out there, and it's like, wait a second, this is part of a massive ecosystem here. It was something that really shifted. I think in a way released a little bit of that pressure to just so solely put so much pressure on this one thing and it has to do
Mm-hmm.
this, it's going to do this. And then, when that doesn't happen, it's like, okay, zoom out. This is part of a bigger picture ecosystem here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That also is definitely something that has helped me as well. It's okay if this post flops or whatever. Like, it's people are looking at your whole profile. It's a collection of
Yeah.
things. I think that's always a helpful reframe.
I love that. Well, I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for our
Mhm.
conversation, this conversation. I kind of said I have selfish intentions here,
No.
but I think this is just such important conversations to have. And I'm so grateful for just the learnings and the takeaways, even for myself. But also I know that
Mm,
for a lot of people who listen to this, this is going to be truly such a really good conversation for them to tap into and listen to, and also be able to connect with you. If it's stuff that's really landing, to really connect with you, I think is one of the a big thing too. So thank you for being here. Thanks for your energy, your conversation. I'm so grateful.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm so grateful that you had me on. I loved your questions. This was just amazing. And yeah, I loved being on, and I love talking about this stuff and geeking out about it all. So thank you so much for having
You're
me on the
so
podcast today.
Oh, you're so welcome. And for those that have tuned in, I trust and I know that this is, if you were here and listened to the entire thing, that it was meant for you. And if you feel aligned, you can share it and follow, subscribe, be part of this community of us that are not afraid to go beyond the surface and be part of this community.